You forgot the first rule of remakes, Jill. Don't f with the original.
So I just comprehended that 2026 will officially be 10 years since Disney's Moana was released, and it will also mark the release of its live-action remake, coming only 2 years after its sequel and starring the same actor as Maui. And we just had a live-action remake of another princess movie finally released, so that brings us to 8 live-action versions of the official princesses, and up until recently a Tangled remake was also in development, and I wouldn't be surprised if the upcoming special based around The Princess and the Frog is really a test to see if there's enough interest for a live-action remake of that as well. So I'm going to do a good old-fashioned countdown of how our girls translated to live action, going from worst to best, and I doubt the number 1 pick will be surprising. Shall we? So here we have the movie so bad Jiron Jaejao became a legit YouTuber just to slate it. It also infamously required a $30 purchase to watch in addition to a Disney Plus subscription, so further marking down, because if you're making people jump through that many hoops, you better be delivering a good product. And there was no reason for this movie to suck as bad as it did. I mean, removing the songs? The original almost wasn't a musical to begin with, and only made one by executive mandates. And it made significant changes from the Ballad of Hua Mulan, such as Mulan being discovered midway through the story, so a more faithful adaptation that retains some of the animated version's charm seems plausible, and going for a wuxia vibe to take advantage of live action? Curse of the Golden Flower is one of my favourite films, and House of Flying Daggers was my gateway to the genre. And they almost had Ang Lee in the director's chair, and that's someone you could have and should have waited for. But yeah, as far as the positives go, at least Rosalind Chow got paid, and so did Jason Scott Lee, and yay for Gong Li, who was actually the visual inspiration for the animated Mulan. Unfortunately, this movie belongs in the same category of her filmography as, say, Memoirs of a Geisha, which I like to call high-quality trash.
Who paid for the silk on your back, the rest in your bowl, the tobacco in that pipe of yours?
And Mulan 2020 doesn't even have Michelle Yeoh. The problems start with how the original is the most objectively feminist of the Disney Renaissance films for reasons I've already gone into, and so their strategy of trying to hypercorrect any issues with how gender was portrayed in the originals had nowhere to go here. And the decision is to now make her a chosen one blessed with magical specialness who doesn't have character development involving cultivating the skills she already has while working to prove herself. In effect, despite the movie being promoted as more accurate and respectful to China, this takes away the story's Eastern values and repackages them with Western corporate feminism. Okay, so here's how I've had it broken down for me by my female friends over the years. Western women don't often get stories like Rocky, where a heroine fails, works harder, and succeeds through determination because female socialization teaches that qualities are supposed to be innate. So many girls are often discouraged from pursuing certain things when they're not automatically good at them right away. And this is why Mulan struck such a chord in her original film, because she was a regular person who realistically was quite terrible on her first day at military training like everybody else, and actually gets discharged due to being unable to keep up. But she applies the lessons Shang gives her and cultivates that cleverness she already had to improve. So making her a badass from the beginning who's blessed with magical specialness already makes her character less interesting. They don't even allow her to mess up at the matchmaker, because now it's her sister who ruins things. But Mulan is still blamed because patriarchy, and heaven forbid a female character ever actually be wrong like a normal person. And this has the weird, backhanded effect of low-key pitting women against each other, where instead of people possibly seeing themselves in Mulan like the animated version and connecting to her story of being a screw-up but also getting a second chance to learn from her mistakes, they'd more likely see themselves as the sister and feel bad that they aren't inherently special. The training montage is still there, but now it has no power because Mulan is already a flawless badass blessed with magical specialness. And in an attempt to conceal how shallow this empowerment is, they doubled down by making every other male character a stock misogynist to give the illusion of an arc showing Mulan succeeding against all odds. And for all the claims that this movie was going to be more respectful towards China, the presence of things like a female magic user who's persecuted for being a witch in the Western sense gives the impression that they're trying to portray China as this sexist hellhole, which is very much a pot and kettle situation considering China had Empress Wu Zetian, and has America had a female president yet? But back to seriousness, women who practiced magic in ancient China were very well respected and held high positions in courts as soothsayers or shamans, so one being persecuted just for being a witch is again more of a Western concept, especially since female magic users would only be persecuted if they used it for selfish reasons or to harm others, so she should have been an evil spirit instead, because they have the shape-shifting power that she demonstrates. Anyway, as if the movie wasn't miserable enough with the removal of the warm father-daughter relationship or the romance with Shang, rather than the original's heartwarming climax of the Emperor and everyone else bowing to Mulan as thanks for saving the day and showing her the respect she earned, she now bows to the Emperor, and rather than turning down a position on his council in favour of returning home to her father, where she's told of her worth by him as he throws aside the honours given to her by the Emperor, she's now implied to accept being drafted into his army. As Christina Pan says in her review, live-action Mulan doesn't challenge the status quo, she is the status quo. So yeah, this movie more than earned its reputation as the first live-action remake to bomb financially, and if you want an actually good live-action Mulan, check out 2009's Rise of a Warrior. And as far as the exhausting yet never-ending trend of shallow corporate feminism goes, this may be the lowest Disney would sink, but it was far from the only instance. Now let me preface this by saying, I grew up with Harry Potter, and while I may have had many issues with the films, especially the fourth, I was an Emma Watson defender from day one. She was the absolute perfect Hermione, and understood the character so well, even improving her in places from the books where, let's be honest, it's increasingly obvious that she was the self-insert for a card-carrying mean girl. Whereas in the films, Emma leaned more into being annoying in a funny way, with this being one moment in said fourth film I actually liked.
What did she say?
No, of course. She said yes.
She should do more comedy. And I've also enjoyed her work in films like The Perks of Being a Wallflower, The Bling Ring, and especially Noah, which I think is one of her best performances.
I know, I cannot stop you from that crying! Please don't let them die crying!
Yes, you're probably guessing that she was then future wife for a while, and that's probably why live-action Belle gets slightly ahead of Mulan on this list, so hopefully this take comes across as nuanced.
I want much more than this provincial life.
With regards to her singing, I'd recommend this breakdown by Sideways to get properly in-depth on the problems with the music in the live-action remakes overall, but to summarise, it's less an issue of talent and more of Disney putting her in a position where she was doomed to fail. Not least because it's nigh impossible to follow Paige O'Hara, but come on Disney, Anna Kendrick was right there.
On the steps of the path.
Anyway, I have my tinfoil hat on to theorise why Emma was given the role. Disney in the mid-2010s were undergoing that quasi-rebranding where they riffed on their old films and gave shallow self-critiques to try and get money from the Disney movie send bad messages crowd. One princess preaching about how you should work hard rather than dream, another getting lectured on not marrying a man she just met, and an actress known for her feminist activism in the lead role of their remake of a film that's been an easy target for bad faith criticism. While most sensible people know that the Stockholm Syndrome accusation is nonsense nowadays, it had a lot of traction 10 years ago. So I wouldn't be surprised if Emma was cast to give the movie a sense of legitimacy, like shorthand to say, see, it's a feminist film, she wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't. And this extended to giving her input in the character's wardrobe, and her infamously insisting that Belle wouldn't wear a corset because we were knee-deep in the corsets equal patriarchal oppression myth. Never mind that the time period this film chooses to go for had the women wearing stays rather than corsets. As my friend Eileen says, that dress is fashion crimes. And before we get into the deep stuff, there are multiple nitpicky changes that are far more fun to rant about. First is that her house is now in the middle of the town. She's supposed to be an outsider who's very apart from everyone else, and in the original her house is further away, and she spends most of the song Belle walking around with her head in a book not talking to anyone else, and being rebuffed anytime she does. Here she's making polite conversation to multiple people, even stopping reading to pay for something with a similarly polite exchange, all while the song's lyrics still talk about her being dazed and distracted or else not fitting in. This may also be a consequence of the attempts to make the townsfolk more sympathetic and redeemable, not accounting for the knock-on effect when it comes to Gaston leading them to be a mob and attack the castle just because. This movie arguably has a more toxic message than the original. It tells budding filmmakers that you can make a lot of money having a story this creatively bankrupt. So another change to Belle is that she's now the inventor and not Maurice, which plays into the story not at all, except when the villagers punish her by destroying her homemade washing machine. I suppose this is meant to add more reason for her to want to leave the town and find comfort in the castle, except there is no payoff to this, with Belle's inventing prowess never coming into play anywhere in the story. No one in the castle validates it, and it doesn't even help her and Maurice free themselves later. And I find this emphasizing how special the character is to be a bit depressing, because in the original, Belle is just a regular girl, whose power comes from her ability to look past appearances. Again, like Mulan, showing that even the person you least expect can do amazing things. But now, Belle has to be hyped up as super special and ahead of her time like we're reading fanfiction written by 12-year-old me. Put it this way, it's like trying to do Encanto with Isabella as the main character rather than Mirabelle. And then there's the, again, go-nowhere edition of her teaching a little girl to read.
Teaching another girl to read isn't one enough.
I know it's stupid to harp on about historical accuracy in a Disney movie, but this one fired first. And unlike the animated version, seems to go for a specific pre-revolution French setting, and as has been said before, not only was female literacy encouraged, but the original Beauty and the Beast fairy tale was published in a magazine aimed at girls. And the problem isn't having this messaging so much as making it the equivalent of Dance Monkey Dance on Disney's part in a shameless attempt to appease the feminists. The original had the same messaging, and was smarter and more subtle about it, while the remake is in your face and dumbed down, because the objective is to be impossible to miss and therefore condemn the absence of.
And I told you no!
The issues with Belle's characterization increase when she gets to the castle, though they mangle the beast so much they're about even by the end. She is already planning to escape minutes after she's given her own room, complete with this juxtaposition that comes across as backhandedly making fun of animated Belle for being weak.
The poor thing is probably in there scared to death.
Exactly.
But in an attempt to emphasize Belle's strength, it weakens her character. She gave her word that she would stay in the castle forever if it meant that her father went free, giving up her entire life for him. Admittedly, one she didn't like that much, but still. And the power of this sacrifice is part of what makes the Beast fall in love with her, that she would give up everything just to save her father, which prompts him to show empathy for her and try to make things better. Now Belle is specifically going against her word without a thought to the repercussions. While we, the audience, know the deal with the Beast, Belle does not, and this is a universe where the Fae exist, and for all she knows, the Beast is one of them, and double-crossing him could have worse results for her and her father, because the agreement she made was about saving his life. So you see Disney sacrificing narrative efficiency and writing quality for the sake of recognizable yet surface-level empowerment.
Oh, you are very strong. This is a great quality.
Another change that ruins Belle's character is that she now learns about the curse and how it can be broken, which may have been an attempt to emphasize how noble she is, but it dilutes the love story because now Belle doesn't develop feelings for the Beast on her own, and it becomes the I can fix him story it's often accused of being, especially since the Beast makes little to no effort to improve this time around. This also messes up his sacrifice later because now Belle knows that by leaving she's condemning the rest of the servants not just to never being human again, but also cessation of existence. So she's prioritizing her own father's well-being over everyone else's. Further diluted by the fact that the Enchantress continues to appear disguised as a villager called Agatha. It was Agatha all along! Who helps Maurice when he's lost in the forest. And the townsfolk are now more sympathetic rather than the original, where it was clear that Maurice had no one to help him and Belle was the only one who could. So now she's less a compassionate daughter and more a self-centered brat who does what she wants and fuck everyone else. And this represents a problem with the remakes, where instead of taking a good concept that wasn't executed perfectly and trying to realize its full potential, they take the pre-2009 films, which were generally the tightest scripts possible, and recognizably the best possible versions of that concept we were going to get, and they just unravel them completely with unnecessary changes, and adding plot fluff or new songs to justify their existence. Emma Watson tries, but she was not set up to succeed, and succeed she did not.
Maybe you haven't met the right man.
It's a small village, Gaston. I've met them all.
Next. I know I'm in the minority here because the Maleficent movie has its fans, and I will concede that Aurora is the character who gets the least butchered in there. In fact, I originally just waved it off as a natural expansion on the character's role, and Elle Fanning gave a performance I actually quite liked.
Are you Maleficent?
Even now, when I have more issues with this movie's treatment of her, I do appreciate that they didn't make her not like other girls the way they did with Belle and Mulan, and she's allowed to have that soft power. That being said, Sleeping Beauty is my favourite Disney movie, and if I were ranking my favourite princesses, Aurora would come in fourth. Even though she has less screen time, I really appreciate that Walt wanted her to differ from Cinderella and Snow White by being less of a typical ingenue, with a nice gag where she lets her animal friends believe that she's been going behind her aunt's back and having secret rendezvous with a handsome prince when she's been told not to speak to strangers, only to reveal that she's just talking about a dream. I meant to include a joke in the original video that she's the type of person who'd go, "I shower naked, how naughty of me." Aurora is also very street smart, as demonstrated by how she instantly guesses that the fairies are planning something for her birthday and plays along, using it as an excuse to have fun in the forest. So even though Aurora is the more feminine princess compared to the three good fairies in Maleficent, she's not portrayed as weak or stupid. Live-action Aurora unfortunately gets shown to be kind of a ditz.
You're my fairy godmother.
What?
I mean, there's one scene where as a baby she nearly runs off a cliff. And sure, the idea is that a girl enchanted to live without fear or sadness wouldn't be a good thing, and this is showing her as a child, but this infantilization continues once she grows up. And she's the butt of many jokes involving Maleficent magically knocking her out that contribute to the numerous reasons that this is a very weird movie, and not in a good way. It almost feels like Aurora of the animated version was still quite nuanced in her own way, whereas live-action Aurora is flattened into the innocent equals stupid archetype. Though an actress of Elle Fanning's caliber does do a lot of heavy lifting, and to be fair, everyone else is flattened to be almost paper-thin while Maleficent is overwritten, so this isn't an issue with Aurora so much as the rest of the film. And again, my dislike for it is nerd rage first, bad writing second, so it kind of rubs me the wrong way that it gets praised for fixing Aurora, not least because I don't think there was anything wrong with her to begin with. Just because she's in the movie more, it doesn't mean it gives her more, despite a gifted actress committing to the material.
No! Don't touch me. You're the evil that's in the world.
Next. I was debating whether to include Alice on this list at all, since her movie is a sequel rather than a remake, and different enough that it can be viewed as its own thing. But then again, its success is one of the reasons we're in this never-ending cycle of live-action remakes, and there's no denying that Alice codified the formula for the heroines in them. I didn't hate it when I first saw it, and portraying Alice as a warrior doing battle with monsters in Wonderland is fairly standard these days, with a Sci-Fi Channel miniseries called Alice exploring the same thing the previous year, and both were heavily influenced by American McGee's Alice, which was actually banned over here so I never got to play it. So rather than the previous 3 entries on this list, which were doomed concepts from the beginning, here it's more the execution.
What if it was agreed that Proper was wearing a codfish on your head? Would you wear it?
Alice.
They want to make Alice a rebel against Victorian stuffiness, which is fine. She was somewhat anti-establishment in the book as well, and possibly autistic coded, which gets expanded on in the animated version. But where the book and Disney film imply that curiosity and desire to find out more about the world are natural for girls her age, this version attributes everything to her father's influence.
Father would have laughed.
Alice is eccentrically brilliant because her father taught her to be that way. The movie is forever tying Alice to her father, complete with her repeating his teachings right before battle.
Sometimes, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast.
We used to see this a lot, where a female character's presence in a story would need to be justified by connecting her to a man, and being there as the daughter, sister, or love interest of an existing male character. Think the complaints about the 2016 Olympics, where numerous commentators would mention the female athletes in association with their husbands or male coaches. Even if it's supposed to be an empowering girl boss ending where Alice charts her own path, she still gets that position because Lord Ascot liked her father. And while Alice does have independent thoughts, the movie's implication is that she got them because her father encouraged her to think for herself while her mother wants her to conform. And this is very interesting if you compare this to the animated film, where there was a storyboarded sequence for Alice to meet the White Knight, who'd be a caricature of Walt himself, and he'd teach Alice a moral, but Walt cut it because he thought it was more important for Alice to learn things for herself, resulting in the very good advice sequence. And of course, this movie doesn't pass up the chance for a corsets equal patriarchal oppression message, which becomes hilarious when Alice's moment of empowerment involves putting on plate armor, which is apparently much less restricting than a corset.
To me, a corset is like a codfish.
And I'm not sure about the choice to have it be Alice's destiny to slay the Jabberwock, but then also be it more that the sword will do the work and Alice just has to hold it. Unless the intent was to show that Underland is actually more restrictive, and she goes home rather than stay there because she has more freedom in England. And Alice's arc ends with her rejecting the arranged marriage and going into business to open trade routes with Hong Kong. So learn to embrace your oddness so that you can become a ruthless capitalist who's going to have a hand in the Opium Wars. One review stated that this Alice would be a good role model because she is not girly. Yes, spelt that way.
Alice has There's been some debate about that.
And you may be asking why I'm ranking this above Maleficent and wondering if it's only nerd rage, but there are a lot of things I like about this film in isolation, such as emphasizing Alice's cleverness and quick thinking, particularly when she ends up 9 feet tall in front of the Red Queen and improvises this bit.
From Umbridge.
I love this scene.
I tower over everyone in Umbridge. They laugh at me. So I've come to you, hoping you might understand what it's like.
And the through line of Alice believing herself to be dreaming, but still instinctively caring for multiple characters and doing what she can to save them because she knew them as a little girl and doesn't remember them, so it's subconscious compassion. Yeah, that works. The second act, where Alice is using her wits to navigate the world, is easily the strongest part. And outside of Alice, this movie has a nice supporting cast who don't feel wasted the way the Maleficent cast do. Anne Hathaway is obviously having a lot of fun, and I could have honestly seen a whole movie about the White Queen. Helena Bonham Carter also does an okay job. Mia Wasikowska is fine.
What do you mean by that? I ought to know who I am.
Some people have accused her of being wooden, but this seems to be a deliberate choice to portray Alice as being disaffected because she's still grieving her father and thinks she's dreaming for most of the film.
From the moment I fell down that rabbit hole, I've been told what I must do and who I must be.
I've heard the expression drowning in the role, and I think that's what's happening here.
I've been accused of being Alice and of not being Alice, but this is my dream. I'll decide where it goes from here.
There are parts to her performance I like, and I think she was at least utilised better here than in a film like Lawless, but this whole film feels like Tim Burton's attempt to do Labyrinth, and not fully understanding why that film endured. But I don't hate it, and there are aspects I even quite like. We can only get better, right? Obviously the most recent one of these, and the only one I hadn't actually seen when I started writing the script for this video, but it ended up exactly where I expected it to on the list. And after the discourse nightmare that was the last 2 years, I was actually really rooting for it to be a massive triumph, and I really wanted to like it. And there are aspects of it to like, but the list of problems could probably make up one of those hour-long videos I swore I wouldn't keep making because I don't like ranting about why things are terrible for too long. So the problems with this movie boil down to it being very obvious that it was heavily reshot. See the drastic changes in Snow White's hair between scenes that look like they used a wig for reshoots. And even if that wasn't the case, it looks that way. Then there's the fact that we've been saturated with Snow White retellings for the last 30 years. We got the wanted to be a good mother and went mad with grief, we got brainwashed and tragic, we got bitter porn who gets redemption arc, we got vampire-esque supervillain, and we got campy comedy. And with 2 girl boss Snow White films released in the same year, and one of them being a favourite of mine, reinventing the wheel was not going to be easy. Especially considering that society's current obsession with preventing aging means that the evil queen would seem like an aspirational figure to a lot of people. But anyway, the problems with the film itself aside, they actually go in a direction I wasn't expecting with Snow White herself.
I feel they need some kindness.
Maybe the girl boss PR made me assume we'd be getting a warrior Snow White, but instead they go for kind politician who remembers people's names and inspires others to do the right thing. I don't want to say I like this, but I also don't want to say don't hate it. It's like, yeah, sure. Now, Whistle While You Work isn't her cleaning the cottage because the dwarfs are incapable of doing it, and it's her giving them some organisation so they can clean it themselves. So she's more Mary Poppins without the freaky reality warping powers. She even teaches Dopey how to talk. And while it's been a joke ever since I was young that one woman living alone with 7 men, I gotta say, this is one Snow White story where it's not there. I found myself becoming a bit of a shipper while I was watching it. Not really sure what we would call this ship, but that's probably also because Snow White easily has the worst love interest.
You must have mistaken me for a knight in shining armor.
I don't think anyone's making that mistake.
I'm serious. I dislike Jonathan so much I am putting Naveen ahead of him. And part of it is down to nerd rage, since I'm really warming towards OG Princey these days, and I would have liked an expansion of that character's role, but nope, we get yet another snarky rogue who makes fun of the female lead and somehow they fall in love. Jonathan just sucks as a character. When we said we wanted romance back in Disney films, this was not what we meant. I'm going to choose to believe that in the first version before the reshoots, it was Dopey's kiss that woke her up. Feel free to join me on this extended cruise up that Egyptian river called Denial. But anyway, I can't fault a single thing about Snow White's characterization or the performance of Rachel Zegler. I became an instant fan when I saw her in West Side Story, and was actually quite pleased when I heard that she would be playing Snow White, even if the idea of a remake made me sigh. And for those who assumed they changed the music because she didn't have the vocal range, I direct you to... So she can sing soprano, it's just that it's now been decided that soprano isn't considered empowering enough, and so girl boss Snow White has to belt sing. Waiting on a Wish I don't hate as a replacement for I'm Wishing, although it feels more like a pop song than a musical number, but Rachel does a lot of heavy lifting, and the parts of the movie where she's just allowed to sing are easily the best. And it feels very strange that the PR lines were hyping up how different this Snow White would be from the original, because that characterization is still preserved. And this doesn't feel like a betrayal of character in the same way Aurora, Belle and Mulan's live-action versions do. And it's also been pointed out that Lily James and Emma Watson said ahead of their remakes that the originals were outdated and very similar things that this gal was given shit for, so yeah, just throwing that out there. And it counts as something that, even if the movie is pretty whelming, the lead actress and the characterization of the princess is easily the strongest thing about it. Moving on. I was actually very stoked when I heard that Naomi Scott had been cast as live-action Jasmine, as I loved her in Power Rangers and knew she'd bring the right balance of fire and compassion that the animated version had, but unfortunately there is the issue of colorism to take into account. Although Agrabah is a fictional fantasy kingdom, it was intended to be Baghdad originally, and the original's reference to the River Jordan indicates it's still part of the Arab world. And so, casting an actress with Indian heritage and more obviously Eurocentric features is a bit of a step backwards, considering Middle Eastern women still suffer from a lack of visibility in the media compared to men. For comparison, WWE had their first African-American women's champion in 1998, and their first female Arab performer wasn't even hired until 2015. And yes, this tangent was an excuse to gush about Aaliyah, of whom I was a big fan back when I watched. Anyway, I enjoyed the Aladdin remake for what it was when it came out, and even though I don't think it's stellar, having rewatched it, I still don't hate it. There's even a few changes I quite like, such as Jasmine pretending to be her own handmaiden for a while as a parallel to how Aladdin will later pretend to be a prince, and how Jasmine begins to figure things out when Raja recognizes Aladdin's scent. Another good bit of drama is how Aladdin promises to meet Jasmine at the palace and is then kidnapped by Jafar, which leads her to believe he stood her up. I feel you on that one, love.
He promised.
People complain that this Jasmine is girl-bossed compared to the original, and I don't know.
How dare you, all of you, standing around deciding my future?
This is animated Jasmine. Out of all the Renaissance princesses, she's the most emblematic of the girl power era. And Jasmine being politically minded is there in the original, with how she stands up to Jafar like this.
When I am queen, I will have the power to get rid of you.
And there are episodes of the TV series, such as Do the Right Thing, that explore Jasmine trying to improve things for the people of Agrabah. This does create a couple of inconsistencies with plot beats from the original that they kept. Like, now she's a politically savvy princess going incognito to learn more about her people instead of cloistered and running away in the spur of the moment, so she should know better here, but that's really a nitpick. And while they do change her motivation to wanting to be Sultan herself, they don't completely strip away the dimensions to her character, since she does still have these cute moments with Dahlia, who, by the way, is a good addition.
How's this going?
It's clumsy, but in a charming sort of a way.
They also make it so that she doesn't know how to vault and is nervous doing it rather than the original, which apparently was a controversial change, but again, nitpick. She also gets a new song, and Speechless is divisive, but I don't hate the idea of it, since she is being told to know her place, and the first rendition of it works as an introspective solo. The only issue is that the film stops so that the reprise can happen, when it really should have been sung to the other characters, since she's convincing Hakim to side with her, and it would have added more power to her father attempting to stop Jafar. And as is, in the finished film, the story stops to have the song, and then resumes to tell us what the song already did, which defeats the purpose of having a song instead of dialogue in the first place. And I don't have any issue with it happening and then her being silenced later, since the song is supposed to be a moral victory.
I do not.
The third act is a bit defanged, but it's not bad. I don't hate it. because at least if they're removing Jasmine being degraded and rising above it, still outsmarting Jafar and using his own ego and misogyny against him, they're still having her fight back and accounting for that. Although goodness knows why they'd go to the trouble of making Jafar more attractive and not preserve the kiss for the sake of the shippers they should have known would arise from this casting choice. There are people who ship Frollo and Esmeralda after all, but again, nitpick and perfectly valid if they're going for a different climax altogether, with Iago turning into a giant bird this time around, which is actually a rock bird, and this comes from Arab mythology, and can be found in the 1001 Nights, so points for that. There's also quite a bit of chemistry between Naomi Scott and Mina Massoud.
Does that mean I'm in trouble?
Only because you got caught.
Not as much as the animated version, but perfectly adequate, and I actually find myself quite liking this transition and musical cue. So while this one has its issues, particularly in how defanged the third act is, again, solid enough film that just had very big shoes to fill. We're getting better now. Now, if I were going on performance alone, I think this would actually get my number one, because while the movie may not be perfect, Halle Bailey's performance most definitely is.
Thank you for hearing me.
Ariel is not an easy role to play, and the character is prone to being misunderstood, which is one reason I suspect the remake took this long to come about. But Halle Bailey clearly understands the character inside and out. And this might be hard to explain, but bear with me.
We don't have to be afraid of them, I know that now.
She understands the role so well that she's able to make it her own, in a way that, say, Emma Watson wasn't able to do with Belle. And within 5 minutes of watching, it's apparent that she was most definitely the best person who auditioned. Whereas, again, Belle should have been Anna Kendrick. With Aurora, they should have waited for Anya Taylor-Joy to become a thing. And with Mulan, there was only one correct choice. Do not give me too old in the comments when digital de-aging has been Disney's thing since the Obama administration. It is a crime that Zhang Ji was not Mulan. But anyway, people complained that the live-action girl-bossed Ariel, but I'd argue the opposite. Animated Ariel was a lot more feisty and prone to impulsiveness, with it being perfectly within character for her to be a party member in Kingdom Hearts. This Ariel is a lot more of an ingenue, being softer and more innocent, which is an approach I quite like.
Isn't it beautiful? Look at the longing in his eyes.
I'm not sure if it was a conscious effort by Disney or that was just Halle's own interpretation, but it really works. She is perfect at this wide-eyed curiosity, and so active in every scene that it's impossible to watch it and not know instantly what this character is feeling. And the role calls for her to be mute for a good chunk of the runtime, meaning she has the challenge of acting without dialogue, and while they do give Ariel more internal songs after she loses her voice, she still has to act silently without overdoing it, and she pulls it off perfectly. And the singing? Well, yeah, professional singer for nearly 20 years, she's every bit as good as you'd expect.
Out of the sea.
And of course, it's not just about hitting the high notes, but also taking you on this character's journey through song and making you experience everything she feels. And she does it like it's no bother at all. She pulls it off with the same versatility as, say, Idina Menzel playing Elsa, and she's definitely as good as Jodie Benson in the original. As Rob Marshall describes her, she possesses that rare combination of spirit, heart, youth, innocence, and substance, plus a glorious singing voice, all intrinsic qualities necessary to play this iconic role. They give the developing romance with Eric a few more scenes, and I won't say they're an improvement, but they're fine, and they don't actively work to undermine the relationship the same way the changes or extra trash in Beauty and the Beast does, and thankfully they didn't turn Eric into a snarky rogue, and Jonah Hauer-King is quite nice in the role.
Most people around here use too many words and have nothing to say.
And I kind of love that Jodie Benson is the voice of the first weird Disney princess, and twice now she's cameoed as someone who goes, well, this gal has a few roos loose. They also change things around so that Ariel gives Ursula some of her blood and a scale to make the deal, and now Ursula enchants her to forget about needing to get the kiss, which I understand is circumventing the people who complained, why didn't she just write everything down as she signed the contract? So I'm neutral enough on that. Less so on defanging the lyrics in Poor Unfortunate Souls. The only change I outright dislike is the neutering of the father-daughter dynamic between Ariel and Triton. Rather than being a typical family situation, now each of his daughters represents the 7 Seas, which is a good concept, but they don't do a lot with it. And he lives on his own away from Ariel, which takes away from the through line that she's his favourite daughter and he has to learn to understand her and eventually let her go, whereas here they seem overly formal.
I have tried to understand you long enough, but as long as you live in my ocean, you'll obey my rules.
John Musker, who was co-director of the original, even criticised them for not playing up the Ariel-Triton relationship since that was the heart of the original story. But surprisingly enough, I'm neutral on the whole Ariel killing Ursula herself thing. While I do prefer the animated version showing Eric getting to save her, I don't hate this change. Or at least I see it more as a necessary evil to prevent Karen from the suburbs complaining that Disney didn't give her daughter a suitably empowered heroine. And with this line, Disney are almost clapping back at the bad faith critics who terrorized this character for decades.
You shouldn't have had to give up your voice to be heard.
And considering the assassinations that occurred in the other remakes, I consider it a win that my favourite princess came out of this not only unscathed, but with a great performance that's on par with her original voice actress. And I'm sure people are in no doubt as to who number one is.
I was having a fine old time. You had to go and choose that one, didn't you?
I honestly agonised over this decision because Halle Bailey definitely had the harder job, since she not only had to sing and perform mute as well as the rest, but Ariel is a specifically iconic character, whereas Cinderella, well, Disney's version is hardly definitive now. And rather than with the worst of these remakes, which position themselves as the true versions, since Cinderella is retold so often, it's easier to accept this one as simply a different interpretation, since although the characters have the same names, the whole presentation is just different. So my brain isn't automatically comparing them. And there were plenty of things to improve on, since the animated film was made after World War II, when Disney had additionally spent the 40s struggling financially thanks to the European box office on Pinocchio, Fantasia and Bambi, so this meant that they had to emphasise the animal characters and restrict human animation as much as possible, which is why Prince Charming has such a small role. The live action also goes for a completely new story, where they even go with the fairy tales tradition of naming the heroine Ella, and Cinderella being a mocking nickname her stepfamily calls her, whereas the animated film makes Cinderella her given name.
Cinderella! That's what we'll call you!
Oh, girls, you're too clever.
And then the third act has a buck-wild twist, where Lady Tremaine finds the glass slipper, tries to pull a Manchurian candidate and breaks it when Ella refuses, later blackmailing the Grand Duke to get a comfortable future for herself, with the Duke himself trying to force the prince to marry a foreign princess so he can benefit from it. This was the height of Game of Thrones mania, where political intrigue was always being added to fantasy stories. And you wouldn't think a Cinderella movie influenced by that show would work, but it does.
If you lay claim to the prince's heart, but with a respectable gentlewoman to put you forward, you will not be ignored.
And in terms of Ella's characterization, while it's nice that the remake's existence caused people to reevaluate the animated one and defend Cinderella from that bad faith pop feminist criticism, it had an unfortunate side effect of hitting this one with the same stuff that just boils down to victim blaming. People say it makes her more passive because she doesn't lose her father until she's older, and so why doesn't she leave?
Why do you stay there when they treat you so? Because I made my mother and father a promise.
It's said outright in the film.
They loved our house, and now that they're gone, I love it for them.
This Ella is a different character from the animated one. We don't know what animated Cinder's was like as a child beyond the prologue, so we properly meet her when she's already a fully formed person, and only spend one day with her as she chooses to rebel against the stepfamily's abuse. Live-action Ella is a different personality type, and it's shown that she's the sort who always puts others first, which is obviously why this one shows her witnessing her mother's death and taking her final words to heart.
Have courage and be kind.
And since she was a literal child when this happened, Ella doesn't fully grasp the meaning of what kindness actually is, and her thinking it means letting others be happy is how she ends up as Cinderella. Her father wanted a second chance at love by marrying Lady Tremaine, and she tries to honour him by being kind to her stepmother, even offering to give up her room so that Anastasia and Drizella can feel more comfortable, and the stepmother twists this around to put her in the attic. And I found it really interesting in this version that we see how her becoming a servant starts out as her being asked to help with the chores and being repeatedly taken advantage of, which is disturbingly accurate to real life, and makes me think of this quote from Queen Maeve of The Boys.
I started giving pieces of myself away, and I guess I gave away everything.
Ella gives a little, the stepfamily takes a little, and then slowly they take more and more, dismissing the rest of the staff until finally being a slave is Ella's new normal, and Ella puts up with it. First of all, using that others have it worse mentality to invalidate her own feelings.
Others have it worse, I'm sure.
And thinking that if she can just keep being kind to her stepmother, then maybe she'll change. Undoubtedly making excuses for her cruelty because of the losses she suffered, which, oh boy, do I relate to even more now than I did when this movie came out 10 years ago. And even the circumstances surrounding the pink dress are different interpretations of the same plot beat. Animated Cinderella challenges the stepfamily to include her and gets told she can come if she gets her work done and can find something suitable to wear. Live-action Cinderella thinks the issue is that they can't afford an extra dress. So again, she thinks she's being accommodating and she'll be rewarded for that.
It cost you nothing.
Then when the stepfamily go, well, I don't want to say mask off because the mask has been well and truly off for a while, but yeah, she reaches breaking point. And yep, this scene is massively toned down from the horrific animated version, but it still just about works.
I will not have anyone associate my daughters with you.
And to people who complain that this Ella is weaker or has less agency than the animated version, here, the fairy godmother first disguises herself as an old woman in need of help, testing her to see if she'll still help someone in need even when her heart has been hurt, which has even more power once you later learn that Lady Tremaine was once like her, and let herself become bitter after she suffered too much. So here, Cinderella is given a secret test of character, and the fairy godmother reveals herself when she passes it. And I like that this creates a message of how kindness comes in different forms. And it doesn't mean being a doormat, but rather determining who is worthy of it. And Ella refuses to let Lady Tremaine take advantage of her again, calling back to how she became Cinderella in the first place.
I was not able to protect my father from you, but I will protect the prince and the kingdom.
So again, to those complaining that this version is weaker or more passive, she does shape her own story, just in a different way to the animated version. And another plus this one has in its favour is having Cinderella tell her stepmother off.
You have never been, and you never will be my mother.
And even this moment is low-key pretty badass.
I forgive you.
Lady Tremaine was infuriated by how Ella remained a good person in spite of everything they did to her, so this is actually the ultimate defeat, since showing pity to a person like this knocks them right off their high horse. And hey, at least there's some proper comeuppance for her and the stepfamily. And yeah, we're going to talk about the prince.
It's you.
This one takes from films such as Ever After and A Cinderella Story by having Cinders and her prince already meet, or be familiar with each other before the ball. And my god, the chemistry between these two is off the charts.
I hope to see you again, miss.
And are you?
In the other remakes, it either wasn't there or took a while to really develop, but this is full-on epic love at first sight that you buy wholeheartedly.
Won't you tell me who you really are?
If I do, I think everything might be different.
It's even more impressive when you consider that romance in Disney films at the time ranged from non-existent to pretty terrible. This is just pure, sincere, and perfect for a fairy tale film. I especially love the choice to have him go in disguise to the house when it's time for the stepsisters to try on the slipper, and reveal himself when he hears Ella singing from the attic. And this scene that they scripted to use in the animated version is restored, and it is just so classically beautiful.
Will you take me as I am? An honest country girl who loves you.
Of course I will.
This is the only Disney film in the last 15 years that actually feels like one. No winking to the audience, no DreamWorks sass, no surface-level feminist pandering, just the pure sincerity and magic that makes the films that endure feel timeless, as opposed to the attempts at having the cake and eating it too that make the magic feel cynical and manufactured.
Nothing is ever given. For everything we must pay and pay.
That's not true. Kindness is free. Love is free.
I sometimes say that this feels like the film they would have made back in the 50s if they'd had the budget and resources to do fluid human animation like they eventually pull off in Sleeping Beauty. And it goes without saying that Lily James is brilliant.
Thank you. It must have been very difficult for you.
Truth be told, there are one or two scenes where I can see the proverbial wheels turning, but that's just a minor nitpick, because she otherwise is this character.
They treat me as well as they are able.
Sweet without being saccharine, sympathetic without being overly angsty. even bringing plenty of humour without being too forced or sitcom-y like certain canonical Disney heroines.
You're making me nervous, actually. Shall I shut my eyes? It might be better. Is that what you meant to do? You think that's what I meant to do?
And with regards to the classic fairy tale love at first sight, how could you not fall in love with her? As cliché as it is to say, it feels like a role she was born to play, where actor and character meet for a metaphorical marriage made in heaven.
Welcome back. You look cheerful and wet. Oh, I took a walk in the rain to cheer myself up.
She's played many different characters since, including none other than Pamela Anderson, and I don't doubt an Oscar nomination is in her future one day, but we all know which of her roles will forever be my favourite. And there we go. I doubt anyone expected this list to be any different, though it is rather depressing that the clear best of these portrayals is 10 years old now, and we don't even know what the future holds. I mean, the live-action Tangled seems to be in limbo now, and I'm guessing they're waiting to see if Lilo and Stitch does well to determine whether Snow White bombing was a one-off or an indicator that audiences are finally not turning up for these remakes. Since besides the live-action Moana, we also have announcements of a third Maleficent movie, Hercules is directed by Guy Ritchie, Robin Hood, Bambi, and the Aristocats. Although, as a fan of a certain underrated movie, I think I speak for the rest of us when I say we enjoy the odd cackle knowing our girl is safe from this whole thing. And I suppose the question is, where does Disney go from here? While the live action seemed like a lucrative market by the end of the 2010s, not only was Snow White a massive financial loss, but even people involved with the animated originals have been blasting Disney for their lack of creativity. And if they continue to milk this well dry, they will eventually run out of animated films to remake. And then what? Remake the direct-to-video sequels as well? I mean, a live-action Return of Jafar and a twist in time wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I doubt they pay that much attention to whatever YouTubers are saying, but they do pay attention to box office receipts. And as I've said before, this is an industry-wide issue. Studios and investors want safe bets and the illusion of a guarantee that something will be a big thing, which is why we were saturated with recognizable IPs and franchises long before Disney started doing these live-action remakes. And the industry has been through this all before. Since back in the 60s it was costume epics and big showy musicals, all trying to be event movies to lure people away from television. The budgets eventually getting too big that it was impossible to feasibly see a return on them. But audiences didn't stop going to see movies. They showed up for movies that felt different, that felt like they had passion behind them, that spoke to what they truly wanted from their art. I mean, that's why in my first film appreciation class, my lecturer said everyone loves the 70s, and the change is already happening, since this year's first big hit is shaping up to be Sinners, which isn't an adaptation of anything, and made for the comparatively lower budget of $90 million, so it remains to be seen how Disney will adapt to these changing winds. And again, us niche fans of a certain movie will continue to sigh with relief that we won't have to paint with all the colours of them in live action.